back to Next Gen Console Watch 2020, our show following all the news on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series. I'm Damon Hadfield, and as always, I am joined by Jonathan Dornbush, host of IGN's PlayStation Podcast Beyond.
Beyond. Hey, Damon.
Hello there. And Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox Podcast Unlocked.
Howdy, Damon.
And today we are joined by special guest Janet Garcia from the IGN Guides team. Janet's been working a lot on the wiki pages for both these consoles, and she's going to be able to speak to some of the known issues that are out there. Janet, thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to be here.
So we're about a week in to the next gen. People have been spending a lot of quality time at home with their PS5s and their Xbox Series X's and S's, playing Miles Morales and Demon's Souls on PS5 and checking out everything that Game Pass has to offer on Xbox Series. But everything isn't going 100% smoothly. There have been a few technical issues and bugs and glitches that people have been running into. And we're going to go over a few of those today and report on any fixes that we know of. So first of all, I think the biggest one, at least on the PlayStation 5 side of things, is this download queue bug. Janet, what is this issue all about?
Yeah, essentially, it's kind of the queue getting overwhelmed by the amount of downloads. Sometimes it can be triggered by a specific game. What this bug looks like is that your games basically end up stuck in this limbo. They won't download, but it also can't be canceled and it can't be re-downloaded. It's sort of just floating in the middle. It also looks like you having the queue ready to go, but there's no progress being made. It'll say something like this game/app has suffered a download error. Those are all signals that you are suffering from this download queue. We've gotten a lot of large reports, specifically in relation to the PS5 version of Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War, but we've also seen it among staff members with games like Godfall, Demon's Souls, Spider-Man Remastered, all of that stuff. The fix is fairly simple. You're going to want to make sure you back up your saves first. So if you have PS Plus, you can just save them to the cloud. Otherwise, you have to do that on an external hard drive. And all you have to do is go to System Settings, head to select system software, and then you just need to go to reset options and just reset the console. That usually does the trick to kind of bring it so that you can download these games again.
Got it. I know some people were encountering some audio issues, at least on PS5. I myself encountered some audio issues with Assassin's Creed Valhalla, although it turns out I don't think this doesn't really qualify as a bug. It's something that you need to, it's a setting you change in your system. Ryan, I know you encountered something similar. Could you share your tale of woe?
Yeah, I don't know if it would, I guess it's not a bug, but it's just annoying and silly. And it was really frustrating me till I finally figured it out. But, I do have the Astro headphones behind me, but my daughter wanted to see Spider-Man. So I had just downloaded the game, just firing it up. So I ran it through the TV speakers and the game starts. Everything seems fine. There's music, there's audio, there's everything. But then there's no dialogue. So I'm getting everything but dialogue. I'm like, wait a second. I think we're missing something here. And all my settings seem correct. And long story short, I ended up having to go into the PS5 sound settings menu. And instead of telling it TV speakers, I had to tell it that I was using an AV amplifier. And then that let me force it to 2-channel stereo sound, fix the problem. So a really just bizarre, again, it is a bug, but it doesn't seem like it actually is. And I wish Sony would address it because I can't imagine I was the only one frustrated with that.
Yeah, I had the same issue with Assassin's Creed Valhalla on PS5, missing dialogue in cutscenes, and then no like ambient noises like Eivor's footsteps while I was wandering around the English.
It turns out it was on another channel that it thought it was feeding somewhere else, but not through your TV. So
exactly, yeah, the PS5 is set automatically to 7.1 surround sound, and I have a little bit older soundbar. It's several years old now, so I also had to knock it down to 2-channel audio, which is a little unfortunate that we won't be getting any of the 3D audio effects on PS5 for now. I can readdress that in the future, but at least now I can hear footsteps on my PS5. Jonathan, what is this sort of rest mode bug that people are finding on PS5? Some people are even like encouraging people not to use rest mode for now.
Yeah, it's been an interesting thing where I've seen some people say I'm now scared to use rest mode, which is essentially how I kept my PlayStation for the entirety of its life cycle. But essentially, people who have left, I believe it's specific games running are most common, but definitely a host of them. People have left games on in rest mode, so the game is still running in the background on the PS5. And then when they come back to play it, it essentially crashes or they're unable to access the game. Which is obviously not ideal when the whole point of rest mode is to let you pick right back up from where you were.
Sure. Janet, is there a fix or a solve for that issue?
Yeah, another way this can manifest too is sometimes the console just won't turn back on. I believe Brian and Max both ran into this issue, and Brian was telling me that it just would not power back on. So all you have to do is hold the power button down for 15 seconds. And it sort of does like a bit of that soft reboot. It kind of looks similar to if you've ever like left it on rest mode and then unplugged it. When you replug it back in, it's sort of recalibrating and picking back up the data, and you kind of run the risk of losing some of your save data, which we have heard stories of lost saves, it having issues turning on, or even in some cases bricking consoles, though I think that's pretty rare. There's not really a good way to avoid it. We're just kind of hoping that as updates come out that this will be a fixed issue. So some people are just avoiding it entirely. You can again go into your system settings and just stop it from ever being on rest mode, so it just being forever on until you like actually manually power it down or select it to be off. I'm personally just rolling the dice on this. I'm just going to keep using rest mode until it burns me, and we'll see how it goes. It's not so widespread that I think you automatically need to not use it. But if it's something you're really worried about, it might be worth avoiding until we get official confirmation that it's all cleared up.
Yeah, for what it's worth, I've been using rest mode since I got PS5. No issues on my end. Janet, what are these the issues with the DualSense charging or not fully charging through the console?
Yeah, this is another one that's sort of hit or miss. It just depends. I've heard different reports from different people, some including our staff, of it just not fully charging or stopping the charge partway through. This is again sometimes connected to rest mode because a lot of players will plug in their controller to charge while it's in rest mode. Essentially, there's a couple things you can do. You can go ahead and try to use the other USB port for charging. So instead of using the front one, which is the most intuitive and easy to access, use the back. Another thing you can do is in your system settings, if you go to the power save section, features available in rest mode, you can change it from only charging your controller for 3 hours to always charging it, because that actually is just, it's defaulted to only 3 hours. If you're someone that got the accessories and you're using the charging dock, you need to make sure that's actually all the way in the dock, which sounds very simple, but it's a little bit finicky. It doesn't fully click in. You're going to want to see that orange glow to make sure it's going. And if all of that just completely fails, you can just kick it old school and just charge it on a power socket. And of course, it's always possible too, with these being new consoles, that some of the controllers are maybe just defective and don't hold the charge the way they're supposed to. So I would say kind of exhaust all your options there. You can also just look into ways to save the battery by like setting idle timers so that's not on as much, because it's also possible that maybe you're just not turning it off frequently enough or letting it sleep when you're not using it.
Now, Ryan, Smart Resume is a big selling point, big feature of the Xbox Series, but apparently there's some issues with that feature as well.
Quick Resume, yes. Quick Resume is
Gotcha.
is not, I know, Smart Delivery and Quick Resume. They're just like the Xbox buzzwords this time around. So just some games, it's just not working. Now, in preview, when I had the Xbox Series X in preview, they had specifically called out in their documentation to us, oh, hey, it's not working. And Gears 5 was one of the examples. But as the console has now shipped and is available to anyone that can purchase one, it's not working in a number of games. So it's not a bug per se. It's just a half-baked feature at this point. It's a great feature, don't get me wrong, and I'm sure it will get addressed over time. But in the short term, for the time being, it is unfortunately kind of a hit or miss, not entirely reliable thing.
Got it. And lest we make it sound like these two consoles are broken pieces of hardware and everything's a disaster. The only issue I've encountered out of these is that audio fix, which was a setting I had to change. And Jonathan, I think you were saying that you really haven't encountered any of these issues with your time on PS5.
Yeah, I've had a couple game crashes while playing a game is something I also saw a bit on the PS4. So I haven't encountered any of these specific bugs. I think one thing that, especially talking to a lot of the staff that had PlayStation 5s, what's really interesting about all these problems, sort of as you were saying, is it's hard to pin down just how exactly widespread they are, because there are a lot of different problems, but none seem to be entirely prevalent. I think definitely the download queue and the rest mode bugs seem to be the most notable ones and definitely have the most impact, but it's definitely been hard to get an idea of just how widespread they are at this point.
Mm-hmm. Janet, before we let you go, are there any features on these consoles that you found that are pretty cool that people might not know about yet?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, this is kind of a negative topic to talk about the troubleshooting and the tech issues. But one exciting thing is, as people are getting these consoles, sure, they're encountering problems, but they're also encountering hidden features, extra things to check out. We gathered up a list of our favorite hidden features for the PS5 and includes stuff like having the game presets where you can pick your difficulty mode, your graphics mode, the camera angle, like kind of automatically how you want to have those set. Back to the controller, you can also set an idle timer in the system power settings to make sure that it is going on rest mode. If you're like, this is great if you're using it for capture, if you're doing multiplayer and just want to make sure that it's not just draining the battery endlessly. And then stuff that you might not think about unless you're really digging into the settings, like not using the internal mic on your controller, because when you do, the vibration and the haptic feedback is automatically turned to the weakest possible. So you're not really getting that full experience of what the DualSense is if you're using that. That's something that might not be noticeable unless you have really dug into that. So we did all that work for you and compiled a list of our favorite PS5 hidden features over on the PS5 Wiki guide. So you can read that Wiki page, or you can check it out on YouTube. It's called PS5 8 Secret Features You Need to Know About. And yeah, and we have that guide and we're always updating it. Like Jonathan said, issues can be random or widespread, but we're doing our best to cover every single thing that comes up. And if it's ours, we try to figure out ourselves. If it's a staff member or a reader or viewer, we try to contact them and see, what is the fix to whatever you end up encountering.
Yeah, viewers, we have very extensive IGN Wiki guides for both next-gen consoles. So if there's any issues you're encountering, any questions you have, definitely check out those guides, of which Janet is so diligently working on. Janet, thank you so much for stopping by the show.
Thanks for having me.
All right, let's get into some news tidbits from this week. Xbox has confirmed that we should expect Xbox Series X and S to be scarce, hard to get well into the new year, well through Q1 for Microsoft. Ryan, Microsoft has said this is the biggest launch for Xbox ever, and yet it's really hard to get. What do you make of these two seemingly contradictory facts?
Well, first of all, it's a good problem for Microsoft to have. It is a little bit of a problem because if you've got demand, you want to be able to sell those consoles. But on the other hand, with the Xbox One, there was no demand, there was no supply or demand problem at launch. You could go find an Xbox One. So that system's early woes have been well documented. So now you've got a great next generation console lineup with the Series S and the Series X. People want it. They're great systems, and they are just tough to get. The supply is not meeting the demand. Now, yeah, it's you always got to look at the PR angle on these things, and yeah, when Microsoft says it's their biggest launch ever, that's great, but it also should be because they pulled off a global launch with the Series S and Series X, which anytime is commendable. In the middle of a pandemic is incredible. Not to make it a console war thing, but even Sony didn't do that. The PS5 is just launching in Europe now, a week later. So great job on Microsoft's part doing a full global launch, but the Xbox One didn't have a global launch. The 360 didn't have a global launch. The original Xbox didn't have a global launch. So when they say they've sold the most consoles and this and that, those are good things, but with the context of, well, you kind of hope so, given that he launched everywhere with these.
Sure. Well, it seems at least, Microsoft is trying to be transparent, trying to set expectations for how difficult the new console is going to be for the next several months. Jonathan, PS5 is also in very high demand, also very hard to find, but I don't believe Sony has sort of presented any messaging about how long they expect that to continue, have they?
No, not particularly. We've definitely been seeing stores pop up and sort of indicate that there will be restocks on a given week or during the Black Friday window, things of that nature. Reports of that are appearing. But in terms of word from Sony itself, we haven't really heard anything about console availability post-launch at all. We know before launch, they had been talking about hoping to sell more units through the first quarter of next year than the PS4 did in that same time frame. And so, of course, that means they're pretty bullish about how they think the PS5 will perform and how many consoles they'll be able to get out there. But in terms of what the cadence will be of availability, we really don't have any sort of idea.
I'm a little surprised that we haven't had any numbers put out by Sony, because unlike Microsoft, Sony hasn't been shy about saying exactly how many consoles they've been selling. So I wonder if that speaks to some significant supply issues on Sony's side, that they're not quite willing to put out numbers yet. Although, of course, this could be one of those things where we record on Wednesday and then they put out numbers on Thursday, and by the time the show goes up on Friday, I look like an idiot.
Well, and I also wouldn't be surprised if they are waiting for the rest of the global launch on the 19th, which is happening after we record, to be able to tally all of those numbers together and to then just be able to put out those facts all as one. I wouldn't be shocked if that was sort of the process at this point for them.
I'm going to throw you both a curveball. A question just popped into my head, and it's not something that we talked about in planning this episode. Last time these consoles launched, PS4 and Xbox One, both Sony and Microsoft congratulated each other, if I remember correctly, and they haven't done that this time.
Xbox did.
Xbox congratulated Sony.
They actually quote tweeted. Yeah, they referenced their tweet from 7 years ago, and the leaders did too. I think Shuhei first reached out on Twitter to Phil Spencer, and then the favor was returned. There were definitely pleasantries exchanged on both sides.
All right, one more little news story before we leave this week. The biggest question since it was announced that Microsoft was buying Bethesda is, are they going to keep all these Bethesda games, Elder Scrolls 6, Starfield? Are they going to keep those exclusive to Xbox, or are they going to basically let those games come to other platforms like PS5? The plot thickens. We have a quote from Xbox CFO Tim Stewart this week, who says, what we'll do in the long run is we don't have intentions of just pulling all of Bethesda content out of Sony or Nintendo or otherwise. But what we want is we want that content in the long run to be either first, better, or best, or pick your differentiated experience on our platforms. We will want Bethesda content to show up the best as on our platforms. Ryan, let's start with you. Does that make it any more clear what their sort of intentions are with Bethesda games going forward?
A little bit. I think what it seems to indicate to me is something that probably has made sense all along, which is I think it's going to be kind of a hybrid model. It's going to be different strategies for different games. And what's interesting, and we talked more in depth about this on Podcast Unlocked this week, I could see it going in opposite ways. Like there's a case to be made for they're going to take the big stuff like Starfield, like Elder Scrolls 6, Fallout 5, etc., and those will be completely exclusive. And then everything else, the smaller tier stuff, the next tier down will be like a timed exclusive and will go to PlayStation 5 and maybe Nintendo Switch where relevant. But I think there's also a case to be made. They could easily be thinking the opposite and have all the smaller tier stuff that's like, good quality, cool stuff, like what seemingly like Ghostwire Tokyo that's already promised as a PlayStation 5 timed exclusive. Maybe that kind of stuff is all completely locked down exclusive, never sees PlayStation 5. And then the big stuff, the big money makers, like the ones I mentioned, Elder Scrolls 6, Starfield, etc., those are maybe timed exclusives on Xbox, bring people in there, but then still make a ton of money down the road on PS5. So I could totally see it going either way, but I do think we're probably looking at kind of a hybrid model here for the Bethesda catalog moving forward as a whole.
Jonathan, do either of those scenarios seem more likely to you?
It's honestly really tough because what I've been saying from the beginning, I still kind of believe, and that it's we'll see how the generation goes. I think Microsoft can definitely make plans. One, they're not going to say those plans fully in detail just now because that doesn't really benefit them, especially before the deal is completely closed. Even if it's assumed it's going to happen, it's one of those things where they may not want to show all their cards at this point. But if we see a similar scenario as last generation where Xbox lags far behind, maybe they don't want to keep the majority of the games exclusive to be able to make money on those other platforms. If Microsoft is very competitive with PlayStation or even doing better than PlayStation this generation, maybe they are more selective about what they put on different platforms. I really could see it being dependent on how this generation goes forward to a certain extent, but I tend to agree, I think, most likely with the idea that the biggest games like Elder Scrolls and even Starfield, but I think Elder Scrolls absolutely and Fallout will likely see on other platforms, whereas the more bespoke, really interesting adventure experiences just won't be available anywhere else because they'll want you to have to get a Game Pass subscription or an Xbox system to be able to play them.
Well, dear viewers, we want to know, which would you prefer? Would you rather have your Bethesda games be first, better, or best? Make sure you vote in our poll at IGN.com, and we will share the results with you next week. Before we go, we do have poll results for you from last week's poll. We asked, which last gen game did you play first, or are you looking forward to revisiting most on PlayStation 5, Xbox Series X? The number one winner with 23% of votes was Ghost of Tsushima on PS5. And then the second place winner was something else. I don't know. We gave out a list of like 10 or 12 games, but the second place winner was something else, something that we didn't think of. So that's fair enough. Down at the bottom of the list with only just less than 3% of the vote was Mortal Kombat 11 and Ori and the Will of the Wisps. Very sad to see Ori down at the bottom because that game's amazing. That's one of the first games that I played on my Xbox Series X because I hadn't played it before. But Ryan, you'll go to bat for that game, right?
You can run it in 6x, like super sampled 6K, like that's or 120 frames per second. Like an already beautiful game is just absurdly glorious on the Series X. Just a tremendous, one of the best Metroidvanias of the last generation. Great game. If you have not played it already, it's right there for you on Game Pass.
Yeah, fantastic game. All right, that will about do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch 2020. Thank you to Ryan and Jonathan and Janet. If you've been watching this show all year long, thank you. We plan to continue it for a while. There's going to be a lot of excitement around these new consoles well into the new year. But after 43 straight episodes, we are going to be taking a break next week. It's a holiday week here in the States. We want to give our crew time to relax and get some well-deserved time off. So we'll be back Friday, December 4th at 6 a.m. Pacific, 9 a.m. Eastern with more news on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X. Everybody stay safe. We'll see you in 2 weeks.